Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. So this was a very much requested video, and by the way, if you can't tell, obviously I can write on screen. This is going to be strictly just showing the map for today. But again, welcome to today's video. Today we're going to talk very in-depth, high level about the best places to land on World's Edge. Again, if you like this type of content, don't forget to leave a like, comment, subscribe. I wanted to do one on Olympus, but they obviously just redid the map a little bit, so I want to kind of let it sit a little and see how much the new town takeover from Pathfinder makes a big difference. So what we're going to do today, obviously it's kind of a static screen as you can tell, but I am drawing on it. We're going to go through each and every single one of these landing points. We're going to talk about some of the ins, the outs, where you can go, some of the hot drops, the best spots, the worst spots, and really kind of break these all down and talk about pros and cons. So again, we're going to talk about, I'm going to try to timestamp this best I can. I'm doing this without a script. We've shoutcasted, we've talked about this all live, and I'm very confident talking about rotations of where to go to. So I will timestamp best I can on every single one of these spots and where you can potentially land on World's Edge. This is obviously World's Edge of Season 6. Obviously this is the most up-to-date. This is what you play in ranked currently, and obviously those are looking for the best landing spots. This is very, very important. I'll timestamp again as we talk about each and every part, and this is pretty much the introduction. So let's begin. Let's talk about first Skyhook. I'm going to work my way all the way around the map until we make one big first full circle back. But I kind of want to talk about Skyhook mostly because it's the biggest, and it can also be quite popular. Obviously we have the baseline here, just kind of highlighting where the ship is going, and that's fine. That's not a big deal. The ship is going to impact where you land, just to be mindful. So if the line was going, let's say this way, or even if the line, I'm going to make that line a lot thicker so you can see it. Even if the line was going this way, or, you know, cutting down that way, just as an example, it does change where you potentially would land, but it doesn't change the rotations out. So let's start with Skyhook again. Let's say you have a few landing spots where you can really land here. You can essentially land in the center. You can land on the left side, you can land on these buildings over here, or you can land on the upper side. So why would you choose those landing spots? So there's quite a bit here. Obviously, if you land in center, it's good to kind of split off and kind of make like a little triangle. There are some beacons here that you can hit as well on the various buildings. Usually one's here, and then one is on the building over there. Let me back up and highlight those again for you guys properly. There's one here, and then so forth. Obviously, this is a very popular area. You most likely won't see anybody within Skyhook all land within the same building, strictly because there's not enough loot. So usually when you're landing, it's good to take like 3 buildings. You usually see somebody land on this one, somebody land on this one, and then somebody land on this one. Or if you like, you would see the same thing happen on the buildings on the north, team here, team here, team here, and they would rotate. Or if you were to see that, you would see Skyhook, maybe somebody grabs train yard, and then somebody grabs one of the buildings here. The idea is that you're always kind of creating a triangle formation so everyone can always kind of bounce between one another. That's kind of the overall goal that you want to make, the bounce in between, right? Because when you do that, it means that at least you're within shot distance to help each other out, and the plus side is that it's an easy way essentially to get out. So let's backtrack on this. Now, the question is, depending on where you land, and we're going to put 3 different dots. If you land on this side of the map, or if you land on this side of the map, or the north side, your areas in which you get out are all very different. So the hard part with green cutting through orange team, it means that you have to be pretty aggro to get out. You can cut through the north side, you can cut through this side, and if you want, you can do big rotation around this side. That's what you really can do as green. Now for orange, obviously you can try to beat green out here. You at least have the choke here, but the hard part is getting through red here. Red most likely will never be able to cut through this because realize how much you get cut off and how difficult that is. You can try to go through the choke, but the hard part is you still have a lot to potentially run through. You'll most likely see red sometimes go north or sometimes just cut around unless they're going for the third party to fight in this mess and conglomerate. So there's quite a bit of outs here. So if we're looking at just the main outs whenever you're rotating, especially let's say the zone was on this side of the map, you essentially would just want to, it's hard unless you have this open spot just to cut through here, or you want to just kind of go a long ways around, cut north, cut that way to get to the circle on the opposite side of the map. You got to think about your choke points, where your weakness is, where can I go from here? So let's talk about survey camp. Survey camp could really hold about, I don't know, let's say 1 team because you're mostly landing on the various buildings. The various buildings are what kind of give you the leverage and where you can go. If there's 2 teams here, and if there's 3 teams here, that's not worth landing at all. Like, there's just not enough loot. You go inside, grab some ammo, or even a gun. That's pretty much all you're going to be able to grab. So your rotation's out, depending on where the zone is. Even if it's on your side of the map, at least you can pull towards Epi side. Let's say the zone is on the south side or this side of the map specifically, right? Depending on where the zone is, obviously you have many ways to rotate. Some of the rotations could be through this angle here just to get through Harvester. You can cut through Epicenter if you want, take the high ground and go this way. I wouldn't really advise going through Refinery unless you're looking to third party over here, or if the zone is over by Skyhook side, at least you have this upper part to really start to rotate through over. So there's a lot of rotations and ways to get out. Obviously, again, we're talking really high level. We're looking at the map from a high level perspective to give you just insight on how you should or can rotate. And I want to keep the video overall that way. We can get more nitty gritty, we can talk more about this, but I wanted to create an overall high level view and the best places to really land. Because essentially there is not necessarily a best place to land, just knowing your ins and outs is really going to give you the best success to really win. So now let's talk about Refinery. Refinery is really difficult. Well, it's a really large location. You got a lot of loot here, here, and then the loot is quite spread out here with some bins on the outside and stuff. The hard part about Refinery is if a zone pulls here, a zone pulls here, a zone pulls here, it's very difficult to get out. Even if a zone is on this side of the map here, realize just how difficult it is still to get to where you need to be. Most of the time, this is still on a low end of the map. So if it pulls on this side of the map, and we've seen endings that occur around this area right here, but the issue is that Refinery is kind of an open area and it's a hard area to hold in general. Doesn't mean it's a bad landing spot. Obviously people land here all the time in ALGS. But the thing that you have to realize that when you rotate, you're rotating through a team through survey camp. You cut through here, you got to rotate through a team through Epicenter. And you rotate here, you got to rotate through a team through Overlook. You can cut in between here, take this, and there's usually a beacon right here if you just happen to miss it. Then you can cut through this whole angle, or even hug this wall, go all the way around, and wherever you want to go. The idea is always to find a cut through and realize where enemy teams are around you. Because if you look at Refinery and where it needs to go, even if it were to sit here, it still needs to get on the high ground, and there's still probably a team located here, and that's definitely a problem. So far, Skyhook definitely provides the most versatility, but again, when you're looking at a team all the way from Lava City, and then you need to cut through here, you're pretty much saying, I got to cut through Countdown, then I have to go through potentially an open space here, probably cut across, go through Churn Yard, go through here, cut through there, and I need to at least probably hold in this area, because you may guess that the zone could either pull this way, or it could pull this way, or it could pull Geyser, kind of depending, and make an informed decision of how you're going to keep navigating to get to that prime real estate. So that's the hard part, and that's what we're kind of discussing. But Skyhook on the left side of the map definitely has a lot of coverage. So now that we talked about Skyhook, we talked about Survey, we talked about Refinery, let's talk about Epicenter. So Epicenter usually has a beacon located here, which is a pretty strong spot that you want to land in, because it gives you a lot of third-party potential. Usually if there's a team fighting Refinery, then you know that you can, once you get your loot, because there's quite a bit of loot on the outside area. There's a loot on the left side over here, a little bit more closer in. There's bins around here, and there's a loot up top in the center. There's a lot of looting potential here. If you hear a team fighting survey camp, you know there's not enough loot there. You can instantly say, you know what, we're going to go third party that. Same thing when it comes to Refinery. You hear a noise, you can go third party that. If you hear noises in Fragment and you know the other teams may not push you, then you can start working your way over to Fragment, and there we go. So now where can Epicenter really rotate? So again, Epicenter is a really big third party kind of central location, because you're kind of literally, no pun intended with Epicenter, you're literally in the center of everything. So you really have a lot of options. Now, if you get 50-50, most of the time, these teams, unless they land a solo, are not going to come a third party right away. Your biggest risk mostly comes from survey camp if anybody's around you. Mostly because if nobody contests them, this is a free notice for them to come and get loot pretty much from your team. Refinery does have a lot of time to get through the loot, and it's pretty spread out. A team coming Refinery means that they kind of have to cut their loot pattern pretty short to get to you. Now, the biggest concerns about Epicenter is whenever it pulls towards this side of the map or this side of the map. You really have to take the same path as Survey and beat them to it. Either cut through Fragment, take a building, cut through the open area here, No Name, to kind of get to that area. You can even diverge and go this way, Not exactly that way. You can kind of take the edge and kind of work that way. Cutting directly through Fragment is kind of a death sentence and really not ideal for what you want to do to achieve just playing safe. Now, again, this is more for ranked. This is thinking high level. You can, as you're working your way through Epicenter, you hear the third party in Fragment. That's when you usually make an informed decision. Say, hey, our team is gonna go into it, or no, let's just keep rotating and go to zone. Those are really options that you have. Now let's clump together both Fragment West and Fragment East. So there's a lot to land here. Obviously, you got Streamer Building. You got the buildings on the north side over here. You got the buildings over here, again, towards the west. And then Fragment East obviously has the big buildings here that are pretty popular to land. And then you have the big buildings in the center. So there's a lot of areas where teams can really pile up. You know, you can almost comfortably put about 3 teams here. You know, when I was shoutcasting APAC, obviously you probably would most likely only see about 2 to 3 teams. 4 would be definitely pushing it, because then that's whenever fights break out. And let's say there was 2 teams fighting here, and there's only 1 over here. That team is most definitely going to third party. So when you're landing, you want to keep that in mind of who's landing where. And this really identifies why a spot is going to be a weaker spot or a stronger spot. So let's say you're coming out of the drop ship, and then you see only just 2 teams landing Fragment, and you're the third. Well, knowing where you're going to go is going to be where the 50-50 is going to be. So you need to make a decision. Are you going to 50-50 and get that pretty quick, or do you think the other team is going to be able to catch up to the fight before you decide to clean it up? So that's why all of these decisions of where you land and where your outs are vital. Just like Epicenter, you're really in the center of the map, so you have a lot of power. You can sometimes just hold a building and kind of wait, especially if you're a Caustic team. Or you can obviously rotate and just kind of make some pushes on where you see them fit for a third party, or if you feel you can push a team out just because you have the jump on them or the 1-up. So anywhere from Fragment, you obviously can work your way this way, you can work your way this way. Notice how every path I'm giving you is always kind of hugging a wall. It's almost like having your back, the back of your back is towards a beach, and then you have the front line in front of you. You know nobody's going to attack you in the back because you're focused away, so that's why you want to have at least some sort of wall or something to kind of anchor yourself. It's going to be a lot stronger than, let's just say, oh, I'm in Fragment West, I'm just going to rotate right in the middle of nowhere, and then you essentially have this, and then potentially this. You just have a lot of mess and a lot of eyes on you, and that's not really a prime way to rotate on these maps. Not ideal. Same thing with Fragment East. It's better just to kind of get out and start rotating. You can find yourself through different locations depending where you need to go and what's safe and what's not. This one's a little tricky because you're kind of on the downhill slope around this area. So just kind of play to your best abilities and what you think. Overlook, we'll talk about next. Overlook is definitely quite difficult as well. It's like Refinery. There's a lot of great loot here, but there's a lot of open area. There's a lot of open area here. There's a lot of less open area, but not many people are going to rotate through this way. You probably rotate through this way if the circle's ending here at the Refinery, then sure, you can kind of pull this way, maybe take some buildings, take some houses on the north side that can be beneficial towards you. But the issue with Overlook is that once you're done looting, you can go to No Name. You can go towards Epicenter. But there's a lot of open land. There's a lot of openness, which can be the issue. Now, when an area pulls over to Overlook, some teams will opt not to stay in Overlook because you obviously want to get KP points. Maybe you want to get a little aggro instead of just sitting and waiting for the end game, because things can get really tight here. And if you don't have sufficient armors, then it's not going to lead to anything positive for the end game. That's usually why you'll see a pro team potentially push out, unless they're confident in the gear that they've collected. Now, if you're getting 50-50 at Overlook, there are 2 ways to look at this. On Overlook, the mass majority of the loot is definitely on this side, especially in the centerpiece, and then some of the outside area here, and then here. The issue whenever you do that, though, is that if there's another team that decides to take these buildings here, or any one of them, is that they can pretty much hard gate you. There's really nowhere else you can go. So you have to keep that in mind when you land in that area, that you really don't, you're not giving yourself any leg room of anywhere safe to potentially go. And that can be really nerve-wracking, especially if you want to rotate, you want to get out. Or let's say you landed here and all you got is white armors, but then of course maybe they got gold over here and now they're just waiting for you to move and make your mistake. So keep that in mind whenever you're rotating, and depending on how you're 50-50ing, and because I mean it's all about loot distribution, knowing that this can have sometimes better loot, sometimes it's just not the best. Okay, now let's move over to Geyser and let's talk about how ways to get out of Geyser and where you could potentially go. So obviously you got the 2 lanes here, right here. And then of course you have afterwards the lane here. Those are really the few main places that you're going to potentially land. The most popular, of course, are going to be the 2 lanes here. You probably won't see more than 2 teams land here, and if they do, they're potentially throwing. There's just not a lot of loot distribution. A lot of people are going to be running around punching each other. And even if two teams land here, it just makes no sense. Geyser's kind of a 2-team area, essentially. Once you see 3, you can start saying that it may not be worth it. It could be popular coming out the drop right here, just as an example. But even then, it's definitely quite rough and hard to kind of rotate out of. So when we pay attention to where Geyser is going, you essentially have the tunnel here. You can rotate out this way, you can rotate out this way, or you can push out this way, you can push out this way. If the circle's here, then these are great. The circles here, those are great. And if the circle's on this side of the map, then of course you got your out that way, or you can kind of work your way this way, depending on where you want to go. There's quite a bit from Geyser, and it's kind of in my opinion, kind of an underrated spot. The downside is that there's a lot of choke points, and a lot of teams will start to rotate through it, and we'll talk about that now when we're talking about Lava City. Again, I know this is a longer video. I'll timestamp it best I can, but I really feel like this will help a lot of you guys out, especially when you're playing ranked and then figuring out, because there's only a limited number of places you can go, right? So when we talk about Lava City, a limited number of places to go, you really got this side of the map, this side of the map. Nobody in their right mind should really land over here on the north side that I'm showing you. It's just because there's not a lot of loot. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to really land there. So most of the time you got the 2 opposite ends of Lava City. So most of the time these 2 teams will fight, just like I've seen in APAC South and North. You really have the north side, but keep in mind Geyser team either going to rotate early and you're going to have to run into them. You're going to have to rotate through this area. This is hard because it's choke and you are low ground. Or you're going to go through the whole dome area, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. You most likely will not see teams pushing over to dome unless they hear a third party. If they're by themselves and they hear 2 teams going in the dome, then they can definitely take that fight isolated. It's why Lava City pushes very quickly over to that, and vice versa. So if you hear 2 teams fighting in Lava City, we're going to segue these both a little bit together. You're going to see the people of Dome say, you know what, we're by ourselves and there's a lot of loot here. You got to loot here, you got to loot here. Essentially good for almost 2 to 3 teams, kind of give or take. It's definitely stretched in because there's also the middle part. But there's a lot of loot here. So if this team hears a fight in Lava City, you know for a fact that Dome is going to be pushing it relatively quickly. Even if Launch Site wanted to get on that action, they have to go through this whole open area and then head over there. And if the zone is pulling on this side of the map, Launch Site is probably already gone. Like they're just not going to fight it. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense to really push. So you're going to see a lot of Lava City and Dome fighting and contesting for whatever they want to fight for. And that's kind of the trade-off there. The Dome has an uphill battle. They have to wait for either the fight or third party. They have to fight for the low ground. They have to go push on to Launch Site. Or they would have the long, difficult journey of going through Sorting Factory, which nobody really wants to deal with. That's a hard fight. That's a hard fight to win. I remember TSM used to land here. Dome is going to take on the outskirts and just avoid the fight to get over to the zone, to Skyhook as an example, or to Overlook. Dome has hard rotations. While it has good loot, hard rotations out. You have to keep that in mind. Now, let's move on to Launch Site. Launch Site has 1, 2, 3. It can almost hold about 4 teams. This is why you see a lot of teams land here sometimes. There's a potentially a lot of loot. Don't let this overwhelm you that there's sections here. Essentially, one team could land in the main building. One could land over here, but you'll still be stretched then trying to fight for loot. And you'll pretty much see them fight. If there's 2 teams fighting here, Dome has the potential to third party and make use of it. Lava City most likely will not rotate through here unless thermal station's on this end. Then you need to be aware of a third party coming to get you. So be mindful of where the circle could end on different segments of the map. It's better to kind of think of it into a 4 quadrant, like kind of we see here, on where you're going to have to go. Because Launch Site essentially only has this area. They have the outskirts here to cut through sorting. You most likely will not see them take the low ground. Kind of a big play. You got Balloon to kind of bounce around and kind of go to different areas to go past sorting. Maybe around this area over here. But overall, it's a little difficult to get through just as much as Dome. You have the same journey to get through. Now, Tree, on the other hand, definitely has more of an upper hand. You probably only see about 2 teams land here, and they're going to take the prime positioning on the upper area. If a team kind of lands in the bottom area, they're kind of throwing. but it's definitely a good way to get loot here. It's just that it's kind of in a low ground area, so if somebody takes middle and they're just peeking for free, this person has low ground, and what if sorting hears the action and decides to show up and start shooting at you? Your only option is to cut through here and just break away and get out, which is not a bad option, but if you're landing on those bottom spots, you better be ready to join up and go for a fight. If you got 2 teams landing here, maybe the third team lands here and then hopes the other 2 fight so they can third party. So there is that option. So obviously we got boom, 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 boom. You got like 4 different spots in where you can overall land. Now the rotations out are a little bit better. You got at least the underneath railing here. You got the part up top. You got this back part here. You can cut through right through the center. And then of course now you have this choke to worry about. You can cut through staging. You can go through harvester on the back end this way. You can come third party harvester. You can come through sorting. You can decide to fight that. You can hear a fight over a launch site. Go fight through that. You can take the outskirts here and push. There's just a lot of rotations. And no pun intended, it looks like we're kind of already creating a tree just by marking this up quite a bit. So there's a lot that you can work through here. It's why a lot of pros decide to land here. Same thing with sorting, is that it's a power play. You got the full railing here, you got the loot here, you got the main building here, which is quite spread out. Similar to Refinery, which is why you're not going to utilize it as much and definitely can be a bit of a struggle to get yourself out of. But nonetheless, once you get through these main looting pools, and what we're looking at, and there's also, you know, beacons and stuff, especially in sorting, is that you have the real estate to third-party tree. You have a way to cut off launch site and hard gate them if they want to come in. You can come take a look at Dome. You can see based on height if anybody's coming from Lava City. You have the free rotation coming in this way. You can cut through this way. Let's clear out some of this. There's a reason why teams like TSM definitely choose these landing spots in the past, just because it provides a lot of versatility and utility of wherever and however you want to go. Even if there's a choke of some sort, there's just a lot of places that you can work your way through sorting. Same thing as we talk about harvester here. We only have a few more spots to talk through, and I know again this is a longer video and I apologize for that. We're going to talk through harvester, thermal, staging, lava, countdown, and trials, and then we're done talking through the amount of map. But it kind of gives you an idea when people are landing. Harvester can probably house about 3 teams. I have a looting guide of how you should loot harvester, and I definitely recommend it, checking it out. It's on my channel. But how you loot, because essentially, you know, you can land in the center and then just start looting a different path, and it's good for maybe 1 or 2 teams. Actually, in reality, because the loot is quite spread out, but if you've got a good looting pattern, you kind of make your way through, then you can really loot this whole area. The plus side of harvester is that you can make your way through many different chokes, many different locations, depending on where the zone is. And harvester has a nice clean connection, very much like sorting factory in general. The hard part about harvester, though, is that you're very prone to third parties from tree, from sorting, and thermal station team rotating late on top of you, or staging. You really kind of have to rotate pretty quick out. You can't just sit there because it's a hard area to hold. There's not many good places to hold in harvester unless the zone is closing and you got your back kind of protected by, like, let's say the zone is here, just throwing it out there. At least you know you have your back protected, knowing there's only so many different areas people can attack you from. Now, thermal station is quite popular. I saw quite a few teams on APAC love, especially really thrive on this, because there's a lot of loot here in the center. There's loot in here, there's loot in the backside, there's loot here. It kind of gives you free staging. You got the rotation here, you got the rotation out, you got the rotation on the upper angle, you got the rotation to that angle, you can take underneath here. You do have height up here and go around. There's a lot of different ways you can spider your way out to get to all these prime real estate locations. So the more angles that you have out with that open field compared to like Outlook, I mean, I can't really, you can kind of use the rocks in other areas. Thermal station definitely has a lot of cover to really provide you to get in and out, so that's why it's a pretty popular spot. The downside of it is that if it pulls over here, it's going to take you a while to get there. The plus side is you should have better loot, but you can only just hope that you'll get better loot. And if a lot of teams don't land in the nearby areas or rotate early, let's say if the zone is over here, you're going to see harvester probably rotate pretty early, and then if you're thermal station, you're behind, you're going to be essentially just trailing a team. You're going to be almost following staging, or you'll be breaking through and just following harvester. Or if you're going through tree, then you're going to be pretty much trailing them. And that's kind of the problem with thermal. You really have to be ready to push a team out and fight for something, which is not a bad position to be in. Kind of depends on the comp that you're going to run. If you're going to use a Wraith, Gibby, Bloodhound kind of really thrives on that. Again, that comp again thrives in general. Staging is a really rough spot to land because essentially if Thermal here's a third party, they're coming for them. Because you got, in staging, you really have only the upper part to land. This one spot, which is why a lot of teams tend to land here. If you land anywhere else, you can land on the bottom, you're going to get shot from above. There's not enough loot on the upper part here to really justify landing there. And there is a beacon here, but still that's kind of a bit of a struggle. You can rotate over to No Name. That's an option. If you rotate this way, you're rotating to Choke. If you're rotating to Harvester, you're going to have to contest a team. And if you rotate down to Thermal, somebody's already beaten you there. So your only option is to kind of go to Train Yard, or you see pretty much this little web of where you essentially can go. Because otherwise, if you stay too long, most teams are going to have to rotate through you from, let's say there's 2 teams Thermal. There's 1 team Tree, 1 team Launch Site, and it ends on this side. And the circle's ending there. All these teams are going to have to show up at your angle over on staging, and you have a lot to worry about. And if it pulls away, let's say over to Overlook, at least with staging, you can work your way over. But again, there's good loot here, but it kind of depends. Every bit obviously requires RNG, but you do have a lot of chokes to get through, and that's problematic. Train Yard obviously suffers from the same thing. Most of the loot is very spread out. It's good, but keep in mind your rotations. You have an open field here. You have high and low ground here with staging waiting for a third party to happen. You have a choke here and you have a choke here. You can kind of cut through here, but again, there's a nice big wall here and Countdown, and now you're moving to another choke from Lava Fissure and Countdown, which is problematic. So Train Yard has a lot of hard rotations. You really kind of have to either third party, get your way out, or if you're just going to sit on the little train yards up top and just camp your way to success, that's not a bad thing either. It's just hard to hold because once somebody sees you up there and they know you're camping, you either have really bad armors or you had good armors and you fought for this. And staging and Countdown, Lava Fissure, Harvester, Thermal, everyone and their grandmother is going to show up and try to grab this if it ends on this side of the map. It kind of suffers from the same issues as staging. Notice as we talk about this side of the map, there's a lot more chokes. The choke points and the open area over here where it tends to land compared to some of like Fragment in this side of the map, which is, you know, kind of has a little bit more versatility. This side of the map when it pulls is definitely more problematic. It's not impossible. You might get a lot of stuff in the open field, but it's difficult. You won't see as many teams able to hold it. Even when I saw a zone that was pulling this way, you probably saw like 5 teams holding this, 1 team here, and then like 2 teams here, and then another team here. It's just, it becomes a mess here. And then when you have to, and then the zone pulls this way, and you need all those teams to leave. That's very difficult. That's really hard to push out of. Now, Lava Fissure and Countdown and Trials. Lava Fissure is fantastic in my opinion because you don't have to worry about the stress of getting third-partied because you're the one going to be doing the third party. If a team can test you on the various spots, because there's some various spots here that are great to land, Train Yard most likely won't show up if the zone pulls this way. If they do, they're just hungry for KP, I guess. Countdown most likely will third party, but it'll take them a little bit because Countdown is also very popular. Staging could come third party if they're rotating over pretty quick. That's something to keep mindful of, but still it takes a little bit to get there because they have this, and then Train Yard has full eyes on them. So it's why Lava Fissure can be kind of a safe bet. You can kind of rotate through Countdown, you can take this, kind of take that angle. At least you can kind of assess the situation because there is an open field here, and you do have the south side, and you do have various angles even though this is low ground. Lava Fissure is quite nice. Definitely harder if the zone pulls on this side of the map because then you have to work your way through Train Yard, Staging, Harvester, Fragment, and every other team. But it's not a bad area. Not a bad area at all. I've landed there several times, and ALGS, it's quite nice. But the issue is that when you go for the 50-50 at the start, you really have to gauge whether or not the team is all going to land together and try to contest or spread out in various parts to secure kind of the triangle positioning that we mentioned before. Now, for Countdown, I know before this was a whole different area. Countdown definitely has a few areas that you could potentially loot. The downside of going center is that Countdown is like just known for third parties. Train Yard, if they hear something, they're going over. Lava Fissure, if they hear something, they're going over. Skyhook is going to rotate over. Trials is going to go over. And if they're in the center of the map this way, I mean, that's kind of a problem. Like Trials, Lava Fissure, and Train Yard, they're all going to fight Countdown. Countdown just kind of gets put in the center, and you have to clean up your fight. Let's say a team lands here and a team lands here, and you're fighting for more than 2 minutes. These teams have all heard you, and they're all going to come and fight you. Because most of the time, not many people are going to highly contest Train Yard. Lava Fissure most of the time is not highly contested. Trials is definitely not highly contested. And this side of Skyhook, usually when you got like 3 teams, it's gauging and saying, we didn't hear anything, let's go over here. And it kind of pulls us all full circle on where teams are rotating, right? So Countdown is hard. Not impossible, but definitely hard. Now, when we talk about Trials, Trials is not the best spot to really land, because if you got to circle all the way on the other side of the map, you have everything to kind of work towards, and it can be very difficult to kind of clean up. So that's something to be mindful of. And especially teams in Skyhook, if they hear what's going on and they hear the action, you don't get good loot. It's very rare that even that you see in ALGS in most tournaments that teams will fight for Trials. It's not the worst location, but it's just difficult to get out of, so that's something to be very mindful of. So now, as we come full circle in this video for today, if this was helpful, I know this was a longer video compared to anything I've really put out, kind of in general, but hopefully this is helpful. Don't forget to leave a like, comment, subscribe. Keep in mind all of the rotations, memorize your outs. I know we didn't cover all of them, but I think having the mindset of where people come from and where they're going to land on the map is going to be beneficial to help you improve, especially on Apex Legends. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to leave a like for Olympus. We'll cover Olympus next. We'll do the same concept. We'll talk through everything. If there's specifically a specific passage you want me to cover, can definitely talk about that as well. But thank you guys again so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.